Part 1. Northern California Deadzone. 6 months after the suicide mission. Alex had spent his mornings this way for the past 6 months. His legs hung over a grass ledge that overlooked a beach. He got up early to watch the fog roll in from the ocean. Compared to last year, this was peaceful, but that didn't mean the anxiety had left him. Anxiety and the wonder of what the new world back home looked like. For Alexander Velasco, it had been easy to turn away from war, from fighting. He had buried many of his friends, but he was still trying to find a way to bury his memories. The fog was misty enough to wet his face. He could see the waves coming in, but not much more than that. He was adding to the morning haze. Alex had given up Ghana cigarettes after the suicide mission, but the sleepless nights and worries had become too much for him. He now picked up Elias's habit, what remained of the world's supply of tobacco cigarettes. He ashed a bud in the grass beside him, then tossed it down to the beach. "Still staring at the fog," a voice called from behind him. It was Layla Lansfield. Alex's blonde lover sat down next to him and dangled her legs over the edge. "Just thinking," Alex replied. "You've been doing a lot of that lately." "Easy when there's nothing to do." Layla wrapped an arm around Alex's back. They could talk, or they could bask in knowing silence. She had no reason to ask what bothered him. Layla already knew. It was the same thought she had since coming here. "I don't suppose we received anything over the radio?" Alex asked. "No. Janet skipped her weekly message today. Last time we spoke, she said things were picking up. Lots of work to be done," Layla replied. Alex murmured. Layla set her head on his shoulder. He found it ironic. During the war, his war, he dreamed of moments of peace like this. Now that he had them, his mind dreamed only of turmoil. He wondered if that was the cost. "I'm thinking about getting the chopper back up to speed today," he finally said. Layla lifted her head and smiled at him. "How soon do you want me to pack?" she asked. Alex smiled back at her. Just like that, Layla was ready to go. Maybe she was as bored as he was, or maybe the call of home was as strong to her as it was for him. "Help me get the bird going again," he answered. "Then we can pack together. It'll go faster that way." Layla stood and reached down with her hand. "Enough of this, then," she said, hefting her lover to his feet. "You head over to the bird. I'll get us something to drink." Alex pulled the sewn-together tarps that covered the hellchopper. The outer hull of the rotorless helicopter was coated with early morning condensation. Along the wings, he could see light spots of rust beginning to form. Overall, she was in decent shape considering her lack of use. He would have preferred to have the one the team used during their fight against Morrison, even if it was a slow, oversized cargo carrier, but McHale had slipped away with that one. Instead, he was stuck with John Morrison's personal bird, another trophy for everyone and everything he sacrificed for New Purgatory. Alex spat off to the side. His thoughts went back to McHale. "McHale, where did you run off to?" Thoughts like those kept him awake at night. It didn't feel right to him that his team had separated so quickly. They had become family, but each of them had left after their largest triumph and skipped the grieving process to return to their own private wars. Alex used the controls to pop open the main hatch of the chopper. It squeaked as it came down. "Hope all the gears aren't that bad," he said to himself as he moved up the ramp. It was as he expected. The same bird with the same sterile smell. No wildlife had taken up residence that he could see. For some reason, he felt comfortable being surrounded by the forest green metal again. A few moments later, Layla came up the ramp with a mug in her hand and passed it to Alex. "Where's yours?" he asked, sipping from the mug. "I can't stomach tea made from tree bark and grass like you can. Once we get back to Alonso's, I'll get a proper cup." Alex laughed to himself as he stepped out onto the ramp. He looked at the large trees all around them in this forest they had decided to live in. Out here, they had to improvise off the land rather than destroyed buildings. After they had landed, they found an old hunting lodge and made that home. It had been a new challenge, but they mastered it easily. Improvisation had defined their lives in New Purgatory. "So, what's first?" Layla asked. "First, we need to make sure the computer systems are still active. After that, we'll need to check the hull for any breaches. Then we need to get her fueled." "The first two are easy, but we're not exactly sitting on a petroleum field out here," Layla replied. Now, you don't think I'd bring us to the edge of nowhere without a plan, do you? Alex asked, taking a long drink from his mug. Layla smiled and crossed her arms. Let's hear it, she replied. I don't want excuses. Just get the generators back online. No, I don't care. We've got children going without AC. Janet was ready to rip her comm out of her ear. Thank you. She pressed a button and severed the link. Asshole. Janet breathed in deep and then exhaled. Leading the city was taking its toll. She had no experience in building and maintenance, just destruction. It wasn't like diverting soldiers here or there to win a battle or a long engagement. It wasn't like scoping down Marines too cavalier for their own good. It was politics, listening, and making demands. She hated it, but the progress in the city's power, plumbing, and overall condition was improving. Everyone wanted to thank her for how she helped lead, how she took control of the reins after John Morrison was dead. Politely, she would smile and credit the people doing the rebuilding. On the inside, she hated the accolades. This wasn't just her doing. There were many hands involved, some of them severed from their bodies now. Problems, Janet? She spun around in her chair. Shit, Tyrese, I didn't even hear you come in. Good. I've been trying to take your advice and being more subtle. I'm glad it's been paying off. Janet shook her head. Well, at least you listened. Running this damn city is becoming more of a problem than it's worth. Goddamn AC is out again, which means the power is fluctuating. I thought we just fixed this. Tyrese nodded as he rubbed his fingers on his forehead. I hear you. At least those new refugees we picked up are faring well. Most people still don't trust them, though. Hard to blame them, recent history being what it is. But they're all damn good at their jobs. That's one less headache, then, Janet replied. See if you can have any of the talented ones get on that AC issue. That's a priority. The last thing I want is people dying of heat stroke in the middle of June. Of course. Would you like me to head down there, too, and lend a hand? I wasn't aware you knew how the Cloudbreaker reactor powers the city. I don't, but I could do heavy lifting and solder wires where it's needed. Janet smirked. She knew her attitude could flip when shit was wearing her down and Vale didn't deserve it. She thought he was inspiring. Without Tyrese, the past few months would have been impossible to get through. Food shortages and a near breakout of a riot between Morrison soldiers and civilians had ensured that. Through it all, Tyrese Vale was there, ready to lend a hand and talk down the dissidents. He proved that talking worked almost as well as waving a rifle around when it came to finding common ground. Go on down and help them then. The sooner we get air flowing again, the better. I'm fucking melting in here, she finally said. Tyrese nodded as Janet was about to turn back around and get on another comm call, but he didn't move. Was there something else? She asked. You asked me to remind you to send a message out to Alex and Layla. You missed it yesterday. Shit. Janet didn't want them to feel forgotten. She needed them, even if they did deserve the rest and the escape. Still, she would have felt a hell of a lot better if they weren't on the other side of the country. Thanks for the reminder. I'll get to it right now. As Tyrese turned on his heel and left, Janet tapped on her comm several times. She hoped either Alex or Layla would answer, but she had been stuck leaving messages the past few months. When she thought about why she hadn't contacted them, she wanted to give herself excuses. She had been rebuilding, most of the time with her own two hands, but the reality was different. She had convinced herself that Alex and Layla might never return. Maybe all Alex had wanted was his revolution, his fight, and now that it was over, he was not motivated to rebuild. Maybe Layla let him fall into that trap for the promise of peace. Janet didn't want to accept that because it meant they had given up. She knew men like Tyrese wouldn't stand for that. He was Janet's only gauge to how the people felt. And as far as he and everyone else was concerned, every Crusader was a hero. And right now, in the middle of the rebuilding, the city needed their heroes. Janet wanted to believe her wayward friends knew that. She let her comm ring once, then twice, 3 times. She wondered if her long-distance enhancements even worked anymore. Boosting the signal with old satellites that still hung in orbit above the Earth wasn't tricky, but it was a tedious amount of work for a shitty signal on the off chance of a message getting through. Then, on the 5th ring, the comm call was answered. Janet? It was Layla's voice. Layla, it's fucking good to hear your voice. Yours too. I figured you were just late on your call. I'm sorry. The work here has me constantly busy. I'm down to maybe 4 or 5 hours of sleep a night, chasing problem after problem. It's catching up with me. It's all right, Janet. We're doing fine out here. But it doesn't sound like you've been having any more luck than the last time you called. Well, there is some good news. We managed to negotiate with Morrison's remnant out in Queens. We've absorbed what's left of them. The Cloudbreaker reactor, as of a few weeks ago, is officially ours. How did you manage that? Layla asked. Violence, I'll bet. Alex cut in over the comm. That made Janet smile to herself. She missed them both. Not just because she needed the help, but because of Alex's smart remarks and ability to level with her. And Layla, because it was nice to have another woman around who didn't take shit from anyone and was an inventive problem solver. It nearly came to that, Janet replied. But a man I picked up helped me negotiate terms with them. It's been a recurring theme. All these settlements of old Morrison soldiers and refugees are more open to integration than bloodshed. Are they integrating well? Alex asked. They've been crucial in understanding the reactor and adding to our military, if you could call it that. Socially is another story. It's hard to call anyone that condoned genocide your neighbor, Alex replied. We'll get it worked out, Alex. How are you two? Decent. We'll be better when we get this chopper up and running, though. On the move again? Janet asked. Yeah. Where to? Home, Layla responded. London, then? Tell the Rovers I said hello. She didn't mean that home, Janet. We're coming back, Alex cut in. Janet almost choked on the scotch she had been sipping on, unsure if she heard what Alex had said correctly. Janet, you still there? How soon? She asked. 2 weeks at the most. We need to make sure the bird can get there first, Alex answered. I understand. And Janet, try not to make a big deal of it. I don't want that spreading around. Better the folks don't take notice, Alex said. I can contain my excitement for 2 weeks, asshole. Just get home safe. Will do. The last go out. Janet felt ecstatic. All the shit she had been dealing with emptied her mind when the comm cut off. Finally, her old team was coming home. She had willingly accepted the responsibility Alex had given her, but she was a fighter, a warrior. She didn't know anything about leadership, save for the small time she spent fighting with the Crusaders. Diplomacy eluded her. It was easier to fight to get what you needed. Still, she wondered if her friends would be enough to rein in the changed city. They were more than heroes, they were symbols, or at least that was what Tyrese had tried to convince her of. 3 symbols are better than 1. Janet, Tyrese here, he called in over the comm. Go ahead, Vale. You might want to come down here. We've got a problem. Can I bring my gun? I would. By mid-afternoon, Alex had taken a break from buffing out the rust in the exterior of the Hell Chopper and laid out on the ramp. He pulled off his jacket and reached into his pockets. There he found 3 items. The first was his journal. The other 2 were what he had found in Jack Newsom's room back at Alonsfo's. Jack Newsom. The man had found Alex and his friends hiding in the wastes, doing their best to fight back against Morrison's Marines. The old man had brought them in, offered them food, shelter, and a chance to take their fight to Morrison himself. All the while, Alex hadn't trusted the old man, and when he finally did, it came too late. In these months of relaxation and reflection, Alex had assumed that Jack got himself caught by Morrison's soldiers on purpose. First, to save his lover, Neala, but also because the old man knew Morrison would want to interrogate him as the leader of the Crusaders. In turn, the old man fed him misinformation about where the team was going to attack. Alex knew he could never confirm that, but it made sense. It was likely one of the few threads that made their mission successful, but the cost came at Newsom's life. There was times Alex wondered how the mission would have played out if the old man had been there with him, but speculating only brought back memories of what had truly happened. What he was most interested in, though, was the little black book Jack had kept next to the journal. It was filled with names Alex had never seen or heard before. Some were crossed out with red or black pen lines. Some names he did recognize, though, like Dellen Johnston's, which had been lined through and erased multiple times. After a few moments, Alex decided to read through the journal again, hoping to find something he might have missed. Journal of Captain J. Newsom, 2026. Here I am, back where I started right after the war, sitting in a booth with a glass of scotch and my 2 little black books. Most people would cross out the names of their team, especially after a failure like the one we just suffered. But the ones that still live, I'm keeping circled. Our arrogance, my arrogance, killed us. Right now, we survivors need the time to learn from that. Dylan went home. It's an exile of sorts. Otto's in prison. I had Nyala take Brandon to a base in Russia. It won't be an easy existence for the boy, but it is the only way to make him better than he is now. Nyala herself will return to the Rangers in Australia and request an undercover assignment with John Morrison. That'll be our existence until I can piece what went wrong back together. A group of veterans from every background fell to an untrained, overpaid army of murderers. Eric's dead. Pacific's is dead. Dale's team is dead. And now I've got to play the role of father to Eric's 14-year-old girl. Maybe that's my lesson. Son of a bitch, I never even had kids myself. Maybe Nyala should have stayed here. I could have gone back to being a captain again. Janet took the news of her father hard. The crying and screaming were expected, but breaking her knuckles by throwing a fist into my wall wasn't. At least I know she's her father's daughter. Eric wouldn't have raised her in a nightclub, but I don't have much of a choice. It's better than trying to slum it out in the wastes. I'll have Alonso put her to work and pick up where her father left off on the weapons training. She's going to have quite a legacy to live up to. My plan as it stands is going to take years. I'm going through every contact I've got. I need everyone to bring John Morrison down. My short list is set, but it's filling out the ranks that'll be more difficult. Right now, I have no idea how to find those others. Mercenaries are out of the question, and I'm not sure if my position in Moore's Marines is enough to sway some of the new recruits into rebellion. The last thing I want is anyone selling out this operation. So much for retirement. Morrison isn't going to let anyone go if the rumors of this Blood Boy project are true. I've been lucky to secure this land and put it in Alonso's name. He can run it until I get out. This will give me the time to figure out troop movements and how Morrison plans on operating out in the new sections. Jana won't understand it now, but I know she'll hate me for it when she's older. Alex closed the journal and set it off to the side. The entries were all similar, just the old man rambling about killing John Morrison and how he was going to do it. The parts about Janet and his time with Morrison's Marines was illuminating history that the old man had kept back from the team, but irrelevant now. Alex needed more than history. He needed to know what the old man had planned if the new mission went wrong. Something about the way the old man wrote made Alex feel like all the names in his contact book weren't just for Morrison, though. He wondered if Jack Newsom had seen another threat coming, beyond John Morrison. It was hard to picture. Alex figured the rest of the world was in no shape for an invasion. Maybe the other names were meant for helping rebuild New Purgatory. Maybe that's why they hadn't been used, or maybe the old man was crazy. No, you knew him well enough to know that's not true. Was he an angry drunk, an vengeful, deceitful liar? Sure, but he wasn't crazy. Jack always had a plan. Alex pulled his body up and reached for his own journal. He had left the old one back in New Purgatory. The bullet had ruined the binding in some of the earlier pages, but it had also saved his life. It was as good an ending as he could have come up with for that part of his own history. Now, he had a new one bound in black leather. Layla had given it to him as a gift after they arrived here. She told him that no matter how far they got, or what they accomplished, that he should never stop recording his memories. He grabbed the pen he had left between the pages of his last entry and began to write. I can't say I know for sure who Jack Newsom really was. The man I knew was a soldier, but would have been a better politician. I've got a respect there for him, but also anger that's hard to express. He was a man I could never grow to trust, even now, after he sacrificed so much for our success. But I'm not sure that sacrifice makes up for everything we lost to get to where we are. He might agree. To Jack, people were either obstacles or building blocks. If he couldn't use you or mold you, he would ignore you. That's why I was surprised when he gave his life nearly 6 months ago. It's like he knew the last obstacle for revenge against John Morrison was himself. How he knew that, I can't say. On our journey, we ran into so many of his old ghosts that maybe he knew it was time. Maybe it was his plan from the start. Or maybe it was his way of fixing a mess that even he didn't have an answer for. I know Eli dying and Ayala being captured changed something in him. Those were two things he hadn't planned on, but we never had a chance to talk about it. But I doubt that would have mattered. Every time I tried to push the old man into talking, he'd just close off. Shut me down with some nonsense about the past, a shitty one-liner, or reminding me to trust him. I felt bad when he gave himself up to save us. All the shit Eli and I thought about him died and went away, as sure as the old man did. It's strange how that works. When Mikhail told us how the old man and Ayala finally went, it made me freeze up. It wasn't the first burden of command I felt, but it was Jack's weight shifting over to my shoulders. From the start, he hadn't been there to lead, and he told me that. He was there to take the blame so I wouldn't have to. He wanted to be the scapegoat while I took in the glory of his connections and careful planning. The old man needed that pain. He needed it to justify his actions 10 years prior, and all the time that had passed since. He needed us to see that he was paying for his mistakes. Otto, Dell, and Janet especially. Part of me believes he needed to test himself, just like he had done with all of us, to see if he was worth the effort he was putting into his goal. Whether he succeeded or failed, I'm not sure anyone will ever know. Yeah, Morrison's dead, but I wonder if the old man was able to forgive himself before he died. I hope that he knew whatever he said to divert Morrison's soldiers worked. He told me that his only goal was to ensure John Morrison paid for his crimes, same as mine. But he didn't tell me about the cost, the decisions, the scars others don't see. So I think he never planned on making it through. He'd rather die than acknowledge what he became. That's the tragedy of the old man. It was his way of throwing everything he had left at the enemy he despised. The problem I'm having now is wondering what would have been next for him had he lived. Not just for New Purgatory or the world, but the man himself. Because in that, I see a future not too different from my own. Alex set the journal aside and decided to get back to work on the bird. There were electronics that needed to be checked for animals in fraying. After a few hours, he found his head in a side panel full of wires and heard footsteps coming up behind him. "She looks like shit, but she'll fly," he said aloud. "What about the electronics?" Layla asked. "Honestly, we won't know until we kick the engine over. The fuel control should work fine, but gauges and radio, I've got no idea." "We're lucky these still run on petrol. We're not going to find a reactor out here." "Yeah, but it's going to be a short trip unless we find a barrel or two. Did you see our reserve tank?" Alex asked. Layla tilted her head at him. "No," she said, putting emphasis on the word. Alex pulled his head out of the wires and motioned for her to follow him. When they reached the outside of the bird, Layla understood. There were several holes punctured into the reserve tank. "Right now we'll have enough to get us to Nevada," Alex said. "Who the hell did this? How would they notice it?" "Wish I could tell you, sweetheart. Maybe it was sabotage from the tower. Someone trying to stop Morrison from making an extended getaway. Doesn't matter now, though." Layla shook her head and made her way back inside the bird. Alex followed. She pulled out a 20-year-old map from her back pocket and splayed it out over the table. The two scoured it, looking for anything from old military bases to airports that might lead to petroleum. "Major airports are Sacramento, San Francisco, Los Angeles, and McCarran. But if we go south, we're heading in the wrong direction. It's too far to go if we don't find anything," Layla explained. "It's probably dangerous down there, too. Who the hell knows what's left of San Francisco?" "What about the military bases?" Alex asked. Layla looked at him sideways. "So a big city is dangerous, but the military bases not so much?" "Military bases usually have old world defenses to keep the squatters out. We're smart enough to disarm them and get around them. Apart from that, it should be safe. Look here, at this one next to this massive dry lake. It's in the perfect location. The further away it is from any major cities, the better," Alex explained. "Tell that to Mikhail," Layla replied. Alex shook his head and made for the cockpit. Even after the time they'd spent out here, he still couldn't fly the damn bird, but he knew how to kick her over. He flipped the pre-flight switches and pressed down on the power. The hellchopper screamed to life. Layla sauntered into the cockpit and pushed the button back off. "Don't want you getting any ideas," she said with a smile. "Yeah, I think I'll stick to something with 4 wheels." Layla smiled down at him. Alex got up and let her take the seat. "I'll patch up the rest of the panels and get our shit in the hold. Then we'll make for that base east of here." It only took an hour and a half to weld the metal panels back onto the hull of the bird. Alex spent another packing the few clothes and items he and Layla had brought with them, and if their guns weren't slung across their backs, they were hanging from a rack on the bird. Alex took in his last moments of the hidden paradise back at the overlook to the ocean. Just this morning he was thinking about his new home, feeling morose about what he had left behind. The hours had passed by without him noticing. 7 in the morning had turned to 2 in the morning. He watched the moon shine through the fog and reflect off the navy waves. He felt lightness in his chest, excitement. It was a rare feeling since the events at Morrison's Tower. That echoed back to when he and Elias had first met Jack. They were both naive then, having no idea what they would be in for. Those were suspicious days, suspicious and heart-gripping. Layla had been right. It took time to forget Elias, to forget the men and women he had lost, to forget that he gambled everything for a cause and then left it behind. Alex reached into his jacket and pulled from it a bottle. 1780. The whiskey gift the old man had given him in London. Some nights it was half empty, other nights it was half full, but it never seemed to run out. The night they toppled the tower, he and Layla shared one drink from it before the real celebration. Alex kept it to remind himself of the old man's example, the example that made him turn away from war. But now Alex knew he could move on with his life and walk in his own shoes. He was not Jack Newsom. He did not sacrifice people, he led them. That was the difference between the two. Where Jack found manipulation an all-too-easy tool, Alex attempted to find common ground, respect. In that, the two men contrasted. "All ready?" Layla asked through the comm, pulling Alex away from his thoughts. He took one swig of the 1780, then put it back in his coat, and gave the Pacific one last look. "Yeah," he replied. "I finally am." Janet moved along Tyrese out the front door of Alonso's bar. There were a group of men fighting. One Janet recognized and another she hadn't seen before. This was nothing surprising with the influx of Morrison refugees intermingling with the rebels or ex-cons. Still, something about this fight felt off. "You asked me to come out and settle a bar fight, Tyrese?" Janet asked. "Nah, it wasn't the fighting that I saw." He was discreet. He didn't tilt his head or point his fingers. Tyrese just kept watching the brawl. "Old Wales building. 10 stories up, middle window. Also, 10 o'clock, 4 stories up." Janet spat off to the side and then unslung her rifle. She sighted down the unknown man in the brawl and squeezed the trigger. The crowd stopped hollering when the bullet smashed into his shoulder. "They're clearing out," Tyrese whispered. Janet moved towards the crowd, and they parted with her passing. Every citizen in New Purgatory recognized her. To them, she was a hero. Hell, she had helped save the city, and now she was trying to rebuild it. Her word was law, and they had all had a better life because of it. "Ian, right?" she called out to the fighter she hadn't shot. "Yes, ma'am." Ian was bleeding from the top of his forehead, and it was running down his nose. "What started all this?" Janet asked. "This guy wanted to fight. He was talking shit about the Crusaders. I took it on myself to set the record straight. And you ended up here. I appreciate the thought, Ian, but we Crusaders can handle our own business. Go get yourself patched up." The man nodded and moved away as the rest of the crowd dispersed. Janet moved towards the body of the fallen fighter. He was bleeding, but it wasn't a killing wound. What looked more painful was the dislocation of his shoulder from the bullet. Janet slung her rifle back over her shoulder and reached for the blade at her waist, then kneeled beside the man. "You have a problem with what I was, asshole?" she asked as she rested the blade on the man's cheek. "You people are so self-righteous. You're no better than the man you murdered, wounding people like me, unarmed." Janet pierced the blade gently into the man's flesh and ran it across his cheek and up to his ear. The man screamed, reaching for his face. I get it. Ex-soldier, Janet entertained. Maybe from the old army who went fascist when Morrison took over. You think the world owes you something, don't you? Through the pain, the fighter started laughing, blood running down one side of his face and dripping onto the pavement. You might have me clocked, woman, but someone else has you. Janet raised an eyebrow, but instead of waiting for an explanation, she pulled the man's hand from his face, smiled at him, and then drove her blade into his throat. He didn't get a chance to cry out again. Son of a bitch, Janet said to herself. Tyrese leaned over, close to Janet's ear as she ripped her blade from the man's flesh. I think we're about to find out who this was. His head was tilted up. Janet lifted her blood-splattered face towards the Wells building. She saw no less than 40 guns bearing down on her. Shit. She expected the guns to start firing, but that didn't happen. Instead, she watched as 3 soldiers rappelled down the building's side. Janet put her blade back in its sheath, all the while keeping her eyes locked on the 3 as they scaled until their boots hit the pavement. The 3 soldiers started moving towards Janet. The crowd was frozen by the appearance of this band. Janet recognized the colors, gray and black digitized camouflage, the same pattern used by Morrison's Marines. Janet stepped over the body of the man she had murdered. The 3 soldiers stopped just in front of her. They were led by a woman. If you're here to kill me, you should have skipped the theatrics, Janet said. The female soldier at the lead straightened her beret. Janet knew immediately that these were Marines, or at least former Marines. The metal MM symbol that had typically adorned the beret looked like it had either been pulled or cut off. Killing you wasn't part of the plan, Trishella, but now I'm starting to change my mind. You should have left my man alive. The woman raised her pistol at Tyrese, but Janet jumped at her and knocked the gun out of her hand. The soldiers on the woman's flank raised their rifles at Janet and Tyrese. Members of the crowd who had been watching raised their own assortment of rifles and pistols at the soldiers. What do you want? Janet asked, forcing herself off the woman and reaching down for her sidearm. An understanding, the soldier replied. There are no understandings with Morrison soldiers. We're not in line with the ideas of a dead man. My soldiers and I see the writing on the wall, Trishella. We're just trying to do what we must to survive. My name is Keeley, Captain Vixer to my soldiers. Are you all the remains of the Marines? Tyrese asked. Not even close, but none of us are familiar enough to speak of them. I still have friends there, but I had to leave them behind when they wouldn't accept that the war was over, Keeley explained. We're too many in number to survive in the waste without infrastructure, but my commanding officer is too stubborn to admit it. So you want an understanding? Janet asked. Vixer kneeled to pick up her pistol from the ground and put it in her holster, and then she motioned for her men to lower their weapons. The crowd behind Janet did the same. The wastes are finishing the job you started. We want reintegration. We're tired of living on the outskirts of the city we once called home. Ever since losing the reactor, the Remnant is looking for direction. My group broke away because the ideas were becoming too extreme. When you converted our scientists, it hit us hard. The Remnant is rudderless. Janet looked down at her boots and shook her head. You people have been hitting our scavenger teams and scouts on the outskirts and stealing our supplies. We're just supposed to ignore that and let you live next to the families you've splintered? That's right, Keeler replied. We've even hit our old allies' convoys if that makes you feel any better. That's how the Crusaders got their start, isn't it? We didn't hit innocent targets, Janet shot back. Don't give me that bullshit. Not while you're standing over the body of a man you killed in cold blood. You don't think leveling an entire building isn't without innocent deaths? All the families of soldiers living in the different sections of Morrison's tower? All I'm trying to do is keep people from starving to death. Janet saw Vixer's fists clench as she spoke. She looked up at Vixer and pierced her eyes with her own. Anyone that close to Morrison needed to die. Every man, woman, and child that lived in that tower was guilty of Morrison's sins, and they got what they fucking deserved. You're only standing in front of me because you and your troops had the fortune of not being there that day. Maybe I need to rectify that. And survival? Redemption? What about that? If you want to make an enemy of us as well, you can, Trishella. But let me ask you this. How much harder is it going to be to rebuild the city when you're being attacked by two different armies and you don't even have one of your own? How are you going to rebuild when you can't even protect your own workers? Vixer stared right back at Janet. Their intense gaze could have set anyone who stood between them on fire. Janet was the first to move. She reached into her flight jacket for her cigarette pack. She flicked open the top with her thumb and pulled out a hand-rolled smoke with her lips. She stuck out the pack to Vixer, who reluctantly moved over and took one for herself. Janet had started to realize that this discussion was more negotiation than active hostility. Yeah, she killed a guy, but if they wanted a sit-down conversation, they could have done it in a less showy way. She was curious as to what they wanted, and while she hated Morrison's Marines almost as much as she hated the man himself, her people had already begun to reintegrate with the other Morrison refugees. The only way we can have this discussion, Janet started as she lit up her cig and passed her lighter over to Vixer, is if you call off your raids. We can't talk about reintegration while our people are killing each other. Vixer lit up her own cigarette and passed the lighter back to Janet. Done. All we want is the chance. It's not a popular idea among my men, but it's better than living like rats. She extended her hand out towards Janet. Janet took a long drag and looked up towards the Wells building, where some of Vixer's soldiers remained. None had their weapons drawn. Then she looked down at Vixer's hand. What has the world come to? Allying with Morrison's Marines? Rogue Sector not, it feels like I'm making a deal with the devil. I wonder what Alex will say. Janet shook Keeley's hand. You're right about one thing, Vixer, Janet said. What's that? This won't be a popular decision. Layla started the pre-flight checks while Alex stood over her. The board is green. Are you sure this is where you want to go? Alex leaned over and punched the coordinates for the mid-northern lake in Nevada. I know it looks like there's nothing there, but trust me. Layla just shrugged her shoulders. All right, but if there is nothing there, we're going to be dead in the water. Alex laughed lightly. There's no water in Nevada, sweetheart. Of that, I have no doubt. Layla shook her head as she brought the bird into the air. Despite not knowing where she was going, she was excited to be flying again. The open sky was a welcome sight compared to the world that had been laid to waste. So what is that you think is there? Layla asked. It's an old military base, but it was off the grid in the old days. Reminded me of McHale's home in Russia, Alex explained. How did you find out about it? Before we left New Purgatory, I ruffled through Jack's room. He kept his notes and contacts in a black book and a journal. They're organized well, but there were some items and contacts he never touched. Like what? I remember him saying he used up all his contacts, Layla asked. No, just the ones he had within arm's reach. The old man was cagey and shrewd. He wanted to lead Morrison on a goose chase through the world's last major holdings, and he only wanted a small team. But he had connections in other dead zones. Does that include this base that we're heading towards? No. Some of his notes were just guesswork and possible relocation spots for him if Morrison ever found out who he was. This base is one of those. He called it a black site, Alex said. A black site? I'm not sure what it means either, but if I had to guess, the name only lends itself to how off the grid it was. Hard to imagine such a huge place like that escaping public notice, though. And what is this about all the other places in dead zones? I don't know, Layla. I haven't read that far. His journal's like mine, except most of it's angry ramblings about killing Morrison and losing his team. Still, it seems like the old man originally planned on living a lot longer after Morrison was dead. Like there was something or someone else out there he was worried about. Layla rubbed the left side of her head with her free hand. Is that what's been bothering you? Partly. I had to get away from there, Layla. All the death. I don't think I was ready for it. Not just the tower, but Tyler, Brandon, old Dell. It's been eating away at me. I know what you mean. I really miss Dellin. He would have been a treasure to have for rebuilding. Alex didn't reply for a few moments. He sighed and then finally said, Yeah, and placed a hand on Layla's shoulder. She turned her head and kissed his fingers. I'm going to read in the hold. Let me know when we're getting closer, okay? Sure thing. Layla replied, letting out a long sigh as she heard the cockpit door swing closed behind her. Alex, she said on the comm after he made his exit. Yeah, I love you. Just outside the door, Alex bit down on his tongue, wishing he hadn't brought up the bad memories of their fallen friends. He hated dragging her through the mud of his emotions. I love you too. Alex found himself on the floor of the main hold. Apart from the engines that made the entire bird rattle and rumble, a hell chopper was a quiet place to be. It was different from the bird that was once packed with his team. There was always talking and working, be it Janet and Brandon cleaning weapons or Dellen boiling needles and bleaching gauze. Jack plotting, Tyler drinking, Talia praying. Now he was left with the engines and the sound of wind. He reached into his jacket and pulled from it Jack Newsom's journal and a black book. With his thumbs, he flicked open and through the black book. There were all kinds of names that Alex didn't recognize. He stopped when he found a large section that was unmarked near the end of the booklet. Egypt, Maeve Amaris, Castor, Gajil, page 134. Alex set the black book aside and opened the old man's journal. He felt like he was violating Jack's privacy even though he was long dead, though it would be like Jack to have left it out on purpose so that the younger man could find it. Piecing together Jack Newsom's mindset was like putting a shattered whiskey bottle back together, but missing the glue that held it all in place. He found page 134 in Jack's journal and read from the start. More time. I had 10 years and I still need more time. New Cairo is a place that breeds warriors. Though my visit there was brief, it is clear they are on the precipice of something great. 100 of their bloodthirsty fighters could make the difference in our war. It would mean shattering another alliance and wasting more time if it turns out to be nothing. No, it can't happen. Not with Morrison so close, and not with Nyala captured. I do know this. When Morrison is dead, they will have to be reached out to. The threat that looms beyond New Purgatory won't wait until Alex and his team are back on their feet. More groundwork will have to be laid. The Council will never let New Purgatory exist on its own, nor will Cairo be able to pledge without a sponsor. The text cut off after that, and Alex was left wondering what the old man meant. The threat had died with Morrison, and while the other nations knew what had happened, Alex believed they would think twice before launching an invasion. Still, there had to be a real fear in the air amongst the Council pertaining to what New Purgatory would do next. More politics. Always with the politics. Alex tried to put that out of his mind as he flipped the page and looked for more writing, but it was just musings about their mission and the old man's regrets. All shit Alex already knew. Damn it, Jack, what are you hiding? What else is out there? He said to himself. Alex tossed the journal aside and went back to the black book, desperate to find more about Jack's late worries. Vixer and Janet made their way into Alonsfo's and found an empty booth to chat. It reminded Janet of all those months ago when the old man had brought her in on his newest scheme that ended up changing the world. One that put her here in charge of the city she had long hated. We'll need to discuss living arrangements, Vixer said as she sat down in the booth, eyeing Janet and waiting for her to set her hands on the table. I kill one of your soldiers and you're right to business? Janet asked. Is that how you like to do things? Give up people? Vixer shook her head. I didn't expect to get this far. You know the truth. My people are dying. Getting into a firefight that neither of us would win and cause more strife wouldn't have done anything. Besides, he was an outcast anyway. You did us both a favor. Janet stared at Vixer for a few moments before punching up the orders for a few drinks. I'll have Tyrese arrange a place for you and your troops. We have an empty building that needs renovation. It's yours. I don't expect that to come for free, Vixer replied. Janet felt as drained as she thought she probably looked. She hated any political situation she couldn't handle at muzzle velocity. Renovating the apartment will be enough. It's larger than you need, so others will find their way in as well. If you make room for them, it's payment enough. Well then, as a show of good faith, I feel inclined to tell you where some of the last Marine holdouts are. A waitress came by and set 2 glasses in front of the ladies. Instead of drinking, Janet swirled her finger around the scotch. If you tell me where they are, I'm going to hit them. You sure you're ready for that? I wouldn't have brought it up otherwise, Vixer said. And your men? My soldiers follow me, not a ghost and his ideals. Anyone who wasn't comfortable with killing our brothers and sisters should have stayed behind. Janet nodded. You have maps, routes. We never kept them on paper. It was agreed that it was the best way to keep your people off of us if you ever captured one of our bases, Vixer replied as she took a pull from her glass. I guess that doesn't matter now. Janet sucked back a pull of her own. When she looked back at Vixer, she saw that the soldier was staring intently at her. What? I'll never understand how you won. Janet had the urge to lash out. A statement like that spat in the face of her dead friends. Oh yeah? Why's that? After living like a refugee, it seems impossible for you to come up like you did. You shattered an empire. We killed a tyrant who played with people in armor like toys. And we did it with the right people at the right time. People who aren't alive to see what we're creating here. Newsom, Vixer spat. He trained me when I was still going through Morrison's boot. You know him? I know that without him, Morrison would still be alive. If you believe that, you know less about the Crusaders than you think, Janet shot back. But yeah, if not for the old man, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you right now. None of us who knew him were surprised when Morrison announced he'd been caught and killed, Vixer explained. Even while serving, he was never a fan of the way the Marines handled things, and he was vocal about it too. Janet waved her off. He was too smart for his own good. He always had a plan, a way out. The last one was permanent, and now he's dead and we're what remains. Vixer smiled. He could have brought down a whole hell of a lot more with what he knew. Knowledge like that doesn't just disappear. Janet smiled. Yeah, with Alex returning, shit would start moving at a faster pace, whether they liked it or not. His presence was not a sign of gentle change. They wouldn't need the old man, because they had the man that brought Morrison down, and for Janet, that was enough. Alex watched as Layla put the hell chopper down on one of the old helipads near the Nevada base. Dust kicked up, blocking his view of the rest of the military establishment. When the bird set down, Alex grabbed a rifle from the weapons rack and strapped it around his back. So what's this place called? Layla asked as she moved out of the cockpit and reached for her SMG on the weapons rack. Jack never wrote it down. He just said that the old government did whatever it could to keep the public away from it. That doesn't strike you as strange? Layla asked. Alex shrugged. Severnaya struck me as strange, but that turned out all right. Chances are there's enough fuel here to get us back to New Purgatory. The dust began to settle as they moved down the Hellchopper's rear ramp. The first thing Alex noticed was all the open space and mountains off in the distance. He studied their more immediate surroundings as the desert sun beat down on them. No vehicles or refuse. The buildings look to be in decent shape, too. Either someone cleaned this place up or it was never hit, Layla explained. Alex trusted her judgment. Before they had met, she had run a salvage caravan on the outskirts of New Purgatory. Layla had an eye for the intricate details Alex tended to ignore, especially in areas many would believe inhospitable. Which is more likely? Alex asked as the two moved down the runway towards the nearest building. Both, maybe. I'm starting to wish the old man left more than guesswork, Alex replied as he neared the door. He gave Layla a nod and then reached for the handle. He pressed down on it until it stopped with a click. It was locked. Alex stepped back and reached for his rifle, then slammed the butt against the handle, knocking it loose. The door opened and Layla made her way in first. There was no lighting, and the interior was just as hot as outside. Flashlight? Layla whispered. Alex closed the door behind him and flicked a switch on his rifle. The room brightened up at Layla's path. Lots of dust. It's hard to breathe in here. Looks like a reception room. Alex tilted his rifle up for a moment. Light fixtures are still in place. Let's look for a switch. You think they still work? Layla asked. Probably not, but that's one way to test your theory. Alex followed the fixtures along the walls looking for a switch or a fuse box, anything that might have controlled the interior lighting system. Alex, you should see this. He followed Layla's voice until he rounded a corner. She was showered in blue light and staring into the glass wall where it emanated. What the hell is this? Alex asked. There were all sorts of flashing blue lights on stacks upon stacks of boxes. The lights flickered rapidly every few moments, and then stopped to glow before starting to flicker again. I'm pretty sure those are computers, or maybe servers, Layla replied. That means there must be power or a generator somewhere. Someone must be maintaining them. No way they've been working for 20 years by themselves, Alex said. Without warning, the lights throughout the building started powering on in rows. It started where they were at, and then spread down the hallway, like someone was hitting each switch one at a time. Oh shit, Alex said as he hefted up his rifle. There is no need to be alarmed, a robotic voice echoed throughout the halls. Like hell there isn't, Alex replied. Who are you? I am the Computer Intelligence Recursive Node, commonly referred to as CERN by my creators. I am the caretaker of the Groom and its inhabitants. They know me as Mother. Alex looked over at Layla. She shook her head. The two had dealt with plenty of old-world technology to know how dangerous it could be. They both hoped they hadn't stumbled upon another Mikhail Koslov. You'll forgive me if I don't call you that, Alex said. You said there are other inhabitants here? Yes. There are approximately 6 individuals of permanent residence, Ciarn replied. We've seen none, Layla noted. They are below us in the true facility. This area is restricted. You must proceed along the lighted route. As quickly as they had turned on, many of the other lights in the facility began to shut off in groups, save for the lone path ahead of Alex and Layla. I don't like this, Alex, Layla said. Is something not to your standard? Alex shook his head. Ciarn could hear everything they were saying. It made Alex not want to think, like he could read his thoughts. Let's follow for now. Ciarn, why were you built? Alex asked as the two followed the trail of lights. I am sorry, Alex. Much of that information is classified. Of course, Layla said under her breath. My duties are to watch over this facility and care for the inhabitants until the war is over, and my creators deem my work finished. The pair reached another door that led downstairs. Alex felt his gut twisting on whether to tell the machine the current state of the world. He wasn't even sure it would understand. Ciarn, the war has been over for 20 years, Alex stated. Impossible. I would have been located and then deactivated by the proper authorities. Many of the proper authorities are likely dead. The United States doesn't exist anymore, Layla explained. That is incorrect. If one citizen lives, the United States shall never cease to exist. But let us not continue this discussion, as it carries the note of sedition. Alex rolled his eyes and kept his rifle close. He didn't like where this computer was taking him, and even less so what it was saying. It was like talking to one of the crazies in a back alley of New Purgatory. No matter how much sense you tried to make, you were always wrong. At the end of the long staircase, they reached a large room where all the lights were on. It was an open space like Alonso's bar, with only 2 small subrooms opposite of the entrance. There were 6 people awaiting them. The leader, a tall, light-skinned man, came forward. You must be the new arrivals. Welcome to the Groom. He outreached a hand, and Alex shook it reluctantly. You knew we were coming? Mother told us of your landing. It was only natural you'd find your way down here. My name is Wade. Alexander. This is Layla. You get many travelers out here, Wade? Oh, every now and again. Most don't stay long. There's not much to our lives, and there's little we have for trade. No fuel, then. Damn, Layla said. Fuel? No, not for some time. As hot as the desert may be, most people arrive here on foot. Ciarn, perhaps we have a store of fuel somewhere? The scanning will take some time, Wade, but I am certain there is a reserve on base. In the meantime, you might feed our guests. Noble idea, Mother. Can we offer you any food or refreshments? Wade asked. Alex looked over at Layla, and she nodded. Sure, we could do with some water. Excellent. Follow me this way. Wade led Alex and Layla to one of the side rooms that looked like a mess hall, but it was filled with sterile stainless steel pipes, counters, tables, and chairs. It struck Layla as unreasonably clean compared to the thick dust that had coated the entrance to the facility. Layla wondered if that was all these people did. Here's where our nutrition system's housed. Wade pointed to two nozzle-shaped devices and two alcoves on the wall. He grabbed a couple of glasses and a single plate. From the first nozzle came water, and from the second came a white paste. Layla thought it looked like mashed potatoes, but soggier. "What is that?" she asked. Wade gave her a half-sheepish grin. "Our last source of food here." He went to sit at a table, and the pair joined him. "Are you part of the original inhabitants?" Alex asked. "Oh, yes. Some of us are the young children of former scientists. Others, like me, are the bones from before the war. We're not much more than a skeleton crew left here over the weekend. There should have been more people here, but they never made it," Alex answered. "Yes, but at least we have Siren. She was activated as a failsafe to protect those of us lucky enough to take refuge here." "What was your job?" Layla asked. "Oh, I'm just a janitor. I was sweeping the floors when an alarm started blaring, so I ran for this bunker like everyone else. Little did we know it was the end of the world. We got a few science types, though, a couple of military members. The others don't talk much. Probably some secret rule they had beforehand. I'm the only one who can keep a conversation going." Another man entered the room and gathered a plateful of slop. Layla caught the man looking down at it for a few moments and shaking his head in disgust. Then he moved beside Wade and sat down. "Good morning, Ken." "Wade?" Ken seemed to ignore Alex and Layla while Wade continued. "Ken here oversaw security. Still is, if you ask him." "Good to meet you, Ken," Alex said. The man didn't look up from his meal or even acknowledge Alex's existence. "Don't mind him, Alex. People around here don't get too personal. No reason to be if you'll be on your way soon." "Right, I get it," Alex replied as he took another sip from his water. "You know much about the uses of this place?" "Well, I knew the rumors, hearsay about aliens and such. Those were the big ones before the war, though. Everything I saw was just testing for new planes and arsenal. Secret stuff they didn't want to get out to the public, or worse, the commies." "And myself, of course," Siren cut in. That put a chill in Layla's spine. Every time she had forgotten about the computer, it cut back in, reminding her that every move was being watched and her speech was being recorded. "Yes, Mother, and you," Wade said. "Is she in all of these rooms?" Layla asked. "Yep, every single one of them. She's not our caretaker for nothing." Ken finished his plate quickly and got up to move. He dropped it in the sink and promptly left. He never said another word to Wade or even looked in Alex and Layla's direction. Alex felt like everything was off. Maybe it was these people's isolation, but the sterility of the rooms and the smell of the floor cleaner made him uneasy. He could see Layla felt that way too. "You'll have to forgive him. You can only eat this junk for so long before turning into a hermit like Ken there. It's all we have, though." "It must be some kind of protein supplement," Layla noted. "Yeah, protein, vitamins, and grains. There's a supply meant for upwards of 200 people. Siren, what was the rate again for 6 people?" "Approximately 300 years without contamination." "So you're sitting on a gold mine of food," Alex said. "Ha! A gold mine. That's a good one, kid. I don't know anyone who'd compare this shit to gold, let alone food." Wade pushed his plate aside, only part of it eaten. "Mother, any luck with that fuel?" "Yes, Wade, though you may wish to begin negotiation." "Negotiation?" Alex asked. Wade scratched the back of his neck and looked off to the side. Yeah, we had this traveler come through one day. He seemed like a decent fellow, but he decided to take advantage of our hospitality," Wade explained. "I think I see where this is going," Alex said. "You want us to kill him?" "Oh, I wasn't going to put it quite as harsh as that. In fact, if you could take him alive—" "No, Wade. This intruder must be terminated." Siren cut him off. "Yes, Mother, you're right. He's killed other travelers that we've sent after him. He's also sitting on top of your fuel. Damn man picked the best spot in this facility to hold up." "He's well armed then?" Layla asked. "I don't know. We don't go down there. Our weapons ran dry years ago, but you folk have guns. You could take care of them for us." Alex glanced over at Layla. He felt that Wade was leaving something out. He wasn't looking at either of them in the eye as he explained this intruder. But with Siren watching and listening, Alex couldn't voice those thoughts. Well, it seems we don't have much of a choice, Wade, Alex said. Have Siren open the door so we can go back to our bird and get a few reserve clips. If this guy is as dangerous as you say, then I don't want to go in there unprepared. Wade hesitated. It was another tell. Yeah, something isn't right here. Mother won't like that. She'll think you'll leave us. Alex waited for Siren to speak, but she didn't. You don't have to worry about that. We don't have enough fuel to go anywhere. You can trust us, Wade. Very well, Siren said. I will allow it. Please return with haste. My children need your aid. Alex and Layla found themselves back outside in Nevada summer heat, but it might as well have been heaven compared to what they had just experienced underground. When they reopened the hatch to the hell chopper, the inside was hot enough to broil them. Forget about leaving. We can't even sit in this bird without getting third-degree burns, Layla said. Alex was sweating through his sleeveless shirt. I don't trust them. And we needed to get out of there. Siren isn't right, and neither are the inhabitants. Alex reached for his canteen and took a pull from it, then handed it to Layla. Oh no, and there's no way we can plan if she's there. Look, we'll help them out and get the hell out. If Siren is a caretaker, then it's probably using prior experience to protect her people. They must have been attacked by raiders before, or something, Alex explained. What about this mystery occupant? Are we just going to murder him in cold blood? Layla asked. If he's killed others, then we're doing these people a favor. He could see that she didn't like it. Alex didn't enjoy the thought of killing someone without knowing if their crimes justified it. But at this point, anything he had to do to get out of Nevada was acceptable. All right, I'm with you, Layla said, reaching up and gripping her dog tag. At least we'll be better armed than they are. Alex looked down at the survival knife strapped to his leg and checked the ammo clips on his bandolier. Yeah, let's hope so. Wade met Alex and Layla back at the entrance to the base and led the pair to the basement where the perpetrator hid. Halfway down the stairs, he stopped, as did Siren's lights. I can't go any further, friends, and neither can Mother. When the man is dead, drag him up here. Then you can take what you need and go, Wade said. We shouldn't be long, Layla replied. Alex gave Wade a nod and flicked the switch to the flashlight on his gun. Every step they took creaked a little more while they moved down. Layla assumed that this was the only place in the building that wasn't maintained. Finally, they came across a door at the end of the steps. Alex shined his light on the handle. It was unremarkable, but he had a strange feeling about it. He motioned for Layla to take a few steps to the side as he shut the light off. What are you doing? She whispered. Alex didn't reply. Instead, he felt around for the handle on the door. Once he had found it, he twisted it and pushed the door open with his rifle. He doubled back to the wall when he heard a whistle in the air, followed by the hard clank of metal slamming against metal. That sure as hell wasn't a bullet. Alex kneeled and flicked his light, but only for a moment. He had been right. It wasn't a bullet, but an arrow. The would-be archer had an advantage. No doubt his eyes were used to the lack of light in this place. Flashbang, Layla mumbled as she watched Alex reach to the side of his belt. He grabbed one, then pulled the pin. After cooking it for a few moments, he tossed it into the room. He heard another clank, followed by the explosion of the shrapnel grenade. The pair heard faintly. Alex hit his light and ran inside. It was a large, empty room with some stairs that led up to a platform. The platform was where their assailant was standing. He might have been momentarily blinded, but now he was bearing down on them with his composite bow. Cute trick, but it's not going to save you from the next arrow, the man above said. You don't have the advantage, Layla spat. You're making a joke about being outgunned. I'm going to kill you first, the man replied. Alex stared up at the man for a few seconds. We're in a bit of a stalemate here. Maybe we can talk? Nothing to talk about, the man replied. If you're with them, I gotta kill you. Those freaks will come down here and drag you away. Alex and Layla weren't sure what the man meant. Wade had told them that he and his people never came down this low for fear of death. You'll have to explain that one to me. They said the bodies of other travelers were left here, Layla called out. The man stepped to the walled edge of his platform with his bow still fully drawn. Beside him was a generator that he gave a swift kick. Some lights flickered on, but they were dim. Look around. You see any bodies? Alex didn't take his eyes off the archer, but Layla glanced around. Apart from a few old dried bloodstains and carbon scarring, there was nothing. They lied to you, just like the others. But at least now you have a choice. Walk away or stay here and die. Why didn't you kill them when they came down? Alex asked. I've tried. Waste of goddamn arrows when they come in groups. They want to whittle down my supply, and then they'll come for me. Besides, have you ever smelled a corpse? At least they take them away. I'm going to lower my gun and we're going to talk. To do that, you're going to let us up there. I get the feeling that Wade left out a few details about their survival, Alex said. The man watched as Alex lowered his gun while Layla followed suit. Alex watched as the archer continued to watch them. He'd probably spent too much time down here alone, but eventually he loosened his grip on his arrow. All right, come on up, but if you try anything, I'll kill you. Alex and Layla made their way up the steps and noted the surroundings. There were water pipes cracked open, a pit for fire, and several skeletons of small creatures. Some were missing bones. Christ, Alex said. This is how you've survived. It hasn't been easy, but it's better than losing my soul like those bastards upstairs. Alex wasn't sure what he meant, but he knew he was going to find out. Sam Gates, the man said, extending a hand. People I knew just call me Gates. Alex reached out and grasped his hands and then shook it, as did Layla. Alexander Velasco. This is Layla Lansfield. Glad I didn't have to kill you. Of course, those are some nice guns you have there. I'm happy you didn't fire any shots. Likewise, Alex replied. So why this existence? Because between their mother and however many are left up there, any kind of fight out here would have been suicide. I'd have to take them all down, shut down Cern, then roll a few barrels of fuel over to my bike, if it's still there. Bike? Alex asked. You know, a motorcycle? Alex shrugged his shoulders. Christ, you must have been some young pre-war kid. Where are you from? That's a long story, Gates, so let's just say New Purgatory. New what? Where the hell is that? Alex remembered that not everyone knew there were places that had survived the war. New York City. That's another long story, but it's still standing. There's a shielding technology and a bunch of science bullshit I couldn't even begin to explain. We came out here after fighting another war. You mean to tell me civilization is in the works again? No. Well, not really. Just a few cities, Layla answered. New York, Moscow, Beijing, Jerusalem, Sydney, and Berlin. They all suffered in the attacks, but they're still standing. And here the rest of us are, scraping out in the waste thinking the world really was over. Gates spit over the platform. Christ, the world really hits you in the balls when you don't expect it. I'm guessing you two came on a plane then? Hell chopper. A kind of jet helicopter hybrid, Alex replied. We could talk about it another day, but right now it's our way home if we get some of that fuel. Not this shit. This is regular fuel. All it's good for is cars, trucks, bikes, and occasionally huffing. It'll burn jet engines right up. Another lie Wade told us. Alex shook his head. Why do they do this? Gates set his bow down, then had a seat by the burnt-out campfire. He motioned for Alex and Layla to do the same. Originally, it was to kill me. They didn't like I was leeching off their water and hunting wildlife. That was until they started dragging the bodies of the outsiders they sent down here away. I don't understand, Alex said, glancing over at Layla, who looked sick. Are you all right? Layla winced, a hand over her mouth, shaking her head. No, not anymore. Gates looked at the pair grimly. That slop they eat upstairs? It's healthy enough, but it doesn't have any flavor. It's just paste. Without a little variety, a man or woman can start to go a little insane. In that moment, Alex began to understand, and he could feel his stomach twisting. Then, from afar, he heard footsteps running into the room. When he turned to look down, he saw it was Wade and the others with makeshift weapons made of bones. Fuck! Gates yelled, jumping for his bow. Layla stood up as the group reached the stairs and hit one with her SMG, knocking him to the ground, but another lunged at her. Alex stuck him with his survival knife and was caught off guard by Wade, who hit him in the ribs with a femur. Alex stumbled for a moment before regaining his composure. Gates fired an arrow that caught another rusher square in the chest. Layla went to fire her gun until she realized the barrel was bent. Instead, she used it to smack another rusher. Alex thrust his knife at Wade, but the man jumped back and swung the femur again. This time it slammed into the side of Alex's skull and knocked him off the platform. "Alex!" Layla yelled as she rushed Wade. Wade took a mock swing at her and then jumped down the platform himself. Alex had fallen into the arms of the two remaining survivors, while Wade helped drag him back to the stairs. "Do something!" she yelled at Gates. "Not a good enough shot that could kill him," he replied with anger in his voice. "Fuck!" Gate pulled arrows from the two men Layla had knocked out. "What the hell do we do?" she asked. Gate shook his head. He had only just met these two, but already felt responsible for their well-being. At many times during his life, he had only cared for himself and his own survival. He wanted to make up for that now. "How bad is your weapon?" Gates asked. Layla aimed up and tried pulling the trigger. The gun clicked, but nothing fired. "It's useless." She slung it around her back. "Then take that," Gates replied as he pointed down to the knife Alex had dropped. "Shit, that means..." "Yeah," Gates cut her off. "We gotta hurry." Alex wasn't sure how long he was out, but when he woke up, his rifle and knife were gone. He had a headache, and a bright fluorescent light was shining down on him. What the hell? He tried to move, but saw that his hands were strapped to a table. Am I back in the mess hall? His legs were bound too. That's when he started to remember what Gates had been explaining. Shit. "Ah, you have awakened, Alex. My children shall be pleased." It was Cern. Her dispassionate robotic voice chilled him. More than anything, he wanted to get off this cold, sterile table and put 2 bullets into whatever server housed the damn thing. "Why the hell are you doing this?" Alex asked. "A mother must provide for their children's needs, Alex. And they are so very hungry. You will make an excellent meal for them, the perfect supplement to their bland diets." Alex heard a door open behind him. He tried to fight off the restraints. He wouldn't let his life end like this, not without a fight. He would not be a meal. "Couldn't just follow orders, eh, Alex? You had to go and talk to our trap down there. I suppose it doesn't matter now. Meat that's still breathing is so much better." Wade bent down to undo the restraints on Alex's left arm. As soon as it was free, Alex threw a hard punch to Wade's jaw, knocking the man off balance. He went to undo the restraint on his right arm when the other 2 cannibals pinned him back to the table. "Do you see it, Alex?" Wade asked. "Look in their eyes. Look in my eyes. Do you see the hunger that gnaws at our stomachs?" Wade brought himself back to his feet and moved back over to Alex. "Struggle no more, my friend. You only make the meat gamey." Alex tried to move again, but the cannibals kept all their weight on him. Wade took a firm grasp of Alex's left wrist and lifted his hand up to his mouth. "You better eat fast, you son of a bitch, because I'm gonna fucking kill you." Wade gave Alex a smile and then rushed his head forward to bite down on the middle finger. Alex screamed out, but Wade bit harder and harder, jerking it around with his head until he finally bit all the way through. "Fuck!" Alex howled as he pulled his hand down. The wound was bleeding profusely, and the other 2 cannibals were growing hungrier with each moment. Wade tore the flesh off the middle finger's bone. "It is splendid," Wade said as he chewed, blood running down the sides of his cheeks. "So rich and tender." "I am happy it pleases you, Wade," Cern cut in. That voice. Alex knew if he made it out alive, it would haunt him for years. "Let us begin in earnest, then," Wade ordered. "Start with the legs. Then we'll work our way up." "Where would they have taken him?" Layla asked. Gates was too busy checking each corner they passed, waiting to be ambushed by more of the cannibals. "Gates?" 10 meters ahead. Closed door," he replied. "That's their mess hall. I bet he's in there." Layla nodded. "What about Cern?" "She can only warn them, but I get the feeling she doesn't want to interrupt them while they're eating." "Eating? He could still be alive in there," Layla protested. "They've already started, and I sure as shit hope he's not. Come on." Gates moved towards the door and slammed down on the handle. It was a gruesome scene. Blood was spilling from the table, but Alex looked intact. "Gates!" Wade yelled with his mouth coated in blood. Layla knew then that he had already started eating. Sam Gates didn't reply, but fired off 2 arrows in succession at Wade's cohorts. Layla saw them go down. Gates had moved flawlessly. Keeping 3 arrows in his hand helped him fire the first 2 quickly. The last was trained on Wade. "Do not harm him," Searin squealed. "It's all right, Mother. I will handle this," Wade replied. Layla moved over to Alex and undid his restraints. She saw he was missing a finger from his left hand, but appeared fine otherwise. "You want to kill him, kid, or should I?" Gates shouted at Layla. Layla looked down at the knife while Alex was wrapping his hand with his shirt. "Let me," Alex said with a groan. Layla saw how bad his wound was and then looked at Wade. A half-devoured finger lay beside his feet. "No," she said, extending the blade out. Layla rushed Wade and slammed into his skull with the butt of the knife. He went sailing to the ground and Layla followed him. "No, do not harm him. Do not." It almost sounded as if Searin was screaming. Layla wasn't sure if machines could do that, but she was sure she didn't care. Layla grabbed Wade's left hand and held it in front of his face, placing it palm down. Then she took the survival knife and pressed down hard on his digits. Blood streamed from them as she pressed harder until the blade went all the way through. Layla brought the blade back up and thrust it down on Wade's face. "How does your own blood taste, you sick fuck?" she whispered. Wade had been screaming through the entire ordeal, and it was not until Alex came over did Layla rip the blade from the man's face. She passed it over to Alex, who stared blankly at her. Never had he seen this kind of ruthlessness from her. He decided to let that thought pass. He would have done the same if it had been her. She was only trying to protect him. "Can we hurry this along?" Gates asked. "I don't want to be here when the machine finally loses it." Alex didn't reply, but kneeled next to Wade, who was moaning in pain. Mother, it hurts so much," he rambled. "Where's my gun?" Alex asked. Storage room, just across from here." "And Searin?" No, please, you can't hurt Mother, please," Wade pleaded. "Wade, tell me where she is and I'll let you live. I'll even wrap up your hand and stitch up your face. But I will let you bleed out unless you talk." "Alex," Gates said. He ignored the older man. For a moment, Wade stopped his groaning and started to cry. "I'm so sorry, Mother, but I don't want to die. She's housed in the entrance, not the server room, but built into the desk at reception. Secrets in plain sight." Alex smiled at the bleeding man. "Thanks, Wade." He recessed the blade to his side and then looked up at Gates and Layla for a moment. Alex took a short breath before driving the blade hard into Wade's ear, digging it deep into the man's skull. Wade barely had a chance to scream out before he was gone. A fearful expression left on his face. Alex took the blade and flicked the blood from it onto the floor, and then slid it into its sheath. The pain shooting up his left arm reminded him of what he had lost. He looked down at the bloody cloth covering his hand. "Motherfucker," Alex said quietly. "You have murdered my children," Searin's voice echoed throughout the empty facility. "You have killed my purpose. For that I shall kill you." An alarm began blaring in their room and through the halls. Spinning red lights flashed all around them. "I don't like that, kids. Let's get your gun and head upstairs," Gates ordered. After Alex found his rifle, the trio moved back up into the main reception area where the alarm still blared. "You could have helped them. Now you will all die." Searin continued the same words repeatedly, and it was starting to bother the group more than the alarms. She might be tied into some kind of explosive system," Gates said. "What if we shut her down?" Layla asked. "Only one way to find out," Alex answered. He hefted up his rifle with his good hand and let it rest on his bad hand's wrist, then fired into the desk. Bits of wood and metal were blown away until it exposed Searin's mainframe. "Stop," Searin blasted from the speakers. "Do not. I am the protector of the groom. You must not." The machine was cut off by Alex's bullets slamming into her hardware. The alarm stopped blaring, and Searin stopped shouting. For now, Alex's nightmare was over. He sat down beside the shards of broken desk, cursing that he had found Jack Newsom's old journal and that it had brought him and Layla here. "What the fuck did we step into?" he said under his breath. Gates wrapped his bow around his body with the string. Nothing good, but you got me out of here. I owe you a thank you, maybe more. Saving me from being eaten alive makes us even, I think, Alex replied. Do you need a lift out? Gates looked down at Alex sternly. How'd you feel if I asked to go with you two? If you'll have me, of course. I wouldn't mind seeing the part of the world that didn't get left behind. We'd be happy to have you, Layla agreed instantly. Alex smiled. There's your answer. Only issue now is finding the right kind of fuel. Oh, this was an old aircraft base. I'm sure there's something sitting around here, Gates said. Come on, follow me. Layla helped heave Alex up, and the two followed Gates out the main entrance. Enough time had passed for the sun to begin lowering out beyond the endless desert. Gates was making for a hangar just across from their location. Once the three got there, they began looking for a way in. Christ, it looks like it's mag-sealed, Gates commented. Government must have been serious about what it was building here. Either that or they got protective over what little fuel they had left, Alex replied. Look for a terminal, Layla said. We could break into it and maybe short the door. Gates laughed and snorted all at once. You're talking about the old world security, lady. The best of the best. No one's cracking that. Their best couldn't stop us from destroying the Empire State Building. It won't stop me from getting through one door, Layla spat. Gates watched as she passed by him and began looking for a panel. She's joking, right? He asked. Alex smiled and shook his head and went to help Layla. The trio searched around for a few moments before Alex had to stop and check his wound. When he pulled back some of the cloth, he saw that it was still bleeding. He knew that if he didn't handle stitching it soon, then it would get infected, and he might lose his hand. Found it, Gates shouted from the side of the hangar. Layla ran over first, while Alex dragged on behind her. Alex watched as she went to work trying different options on the screen. Fuck. It's sealed tight. Only one other option. Knife, she said, reaching a hand back to Alex. He handed her the survival knife, but before she could crack into the terminal's casing, another alarm began to blare. Do you really believe that you could defeat me so easily? It was Siren's voice. Oh shit, Layla said, pointing at the waveform that replaced text on the terminal. You would enter this hangar and destroy me. You have taken my family, but I will not allow you to take me as well. Alex moved next to the terminal beside Layla. Siren, can you hear me? He asked. Yes. We had no intention of coming here and killing your children. They brought that on themselves. All we wanted was fuel, and then to leave. Lies. You speak only lies. You did not have to murder Wade. He had lost the ability to inflict harm on you. Wade and his followers were twisted, Siren. Call it justice for them taking my finger. Alex lifted his left hand up to the terminal screen. He wasn't sure if Siren could see it that way, but he was trying to make a point. Now you're going to open this door. Let us have the fuel that we seek and let us leave. Otherwise, I'm going to get back into my bird and rig an explosive that'll blow you and this hangar to the hell you belong in. Siren did not reply. Alex started wondering if the computer intelligence could contemplate, or if it was deciding how much the fuel inside was worth compared to its survival. Alex was given his answer when the hangar doors slowly pried themselves open. I will extend the same trust to you that Wade did. Do not break it, or I will break you. Siren's waveform winked out as the doors came to a halt. The three made their way inside. Alex realized then that there was no way Siren could have been housed in a computer built into a desk. Half of the hangar was devoted to a massive mainframe of blinking lights. How it maintained itself and where it drew its power from was a question that was burning in Alex's mind. He wrote it off when he saw a bird that resembled a hell chopper next to the mainframe. Well, shit, he said. This had to be built before the war. Look at the hull. Alex moved closer to it. Unlike the current birds that were cragged with uneven parts welded onto the hull, this craft looked like it had been built from the ground up. This isn't a mishmash of jet and helicopter parts that were scavenged and thrown together. Someone built this as a prototype. You think it flies? Layla asked. Alex looked up at her and flashed a smile. I think the better question is, do you think you can fly it? I'm betting the control scheme is different than the one in ours. While Alex and Layla discussed the bird, Sam Gates found the barrels of fuel they had been searching for. Gates was hunched over and pushed the black oil and sand-stained barrel towards the bird. You two done? There's enough fuel here to get us to wherever we plan on going. Nice, Alex said. We'll need to move our things from the other bird, but let's see if we can get this one roaring first. You kids go ahead. I need to find my bike. The last time I saw one intact, I was a little kid. There aren't many around anymore, as you might have guessed, Layla said. Then that's the more reason I need to go find mine. A damn thing got me here. It's going to see me out, too. We'll come find you then, Alex said. I won't be long, Gates replied. With that, the gridded survivor gave them a nod and moved down the ramp. The wind picked up dust and tossed it onto his clothing and face. He walked onto the groom's tarmac in Nevada's dying light. Alex looked around at the body of the new hell chopper. Save for some dust, the interior was immaculate. The main hold was coated in stainless steel, with seating for 3 on either side of the hold. There were gun racks with rifles already placed on them above the chairs, and some room for storage below the seating. Alex noted that several ammo boxes were laid around the hold. When he checked them, he saw that they were full. The coloring was the most notable change compared to the other hell choppers he had been in. Most were colored dark green to match their military origins. He assumed that this one must have been a prototype, a design the military had somehow been made aware of after the world had fallen. While Alex explored the hold, Layla made her way up to the cockpit. She sat in the pilot's chair and outstretched her hands over the controls. It was all familiar. Within moments, she felt as comfortable as she had flying the other hell chopper. Layla began the pre-flight checks. The bird was halfway on fuel, but now they had the means to fix that. Everything else checked out. Electronics, weapon systems, vertical propulsion systems. Somehow it had all survived the war in this lonely desert hangar. Layla wasn't ready for the roar of the engines. When the bird came to life, it made her feel like she was being screamed at by a pack of lions. Even Alex made his way up to the cockpit, covering his ears. Jesus Christ, it sounds like Jack's old GTO, but louder, he yelled over the noise. Layla hit a button that killed the engine sound from the inside, and then looked up at Alex. Maybe if Jack's old GTO had twin Pegasus engines and jump jets for vertical takeoff. Alex thought she might as well have been speaking another language. Meaning? This bird was meant to be fast. 4 engines, like our old carrier bird that Mikhail took, but it's as light as the one we stole from Morrison. You remember when Jack told us how hell choppers came to be, right? Yeah. The old world governments were worried about fuel supplies, so they took the bodies of tilt rotors and fighter jets and made a new monster. Not quite as fast, but they require less fuel and are more versatile, like having the ability to carry troops, Alex answered. Right, but small ones like this were never meant for continuous trips. It's a strike craft with a bay for soldiers. They probably wanted to use it as a short-range craft on old aircraft carriers. Why keep it locked up? Is it the first one? Layla shook her head. I don't know. Only the people who built it or CERN would have the honest answer. What about weapon systems? Alex asked. Layla pointed to 2 different collections of buttons to her right. Machine guns, seeker missiles, and countermeasures to missiles. I doubt they have too much ammo. Like I said, this is built like a rapid tactical bird. She put her hand up to her forehead to rub it. We really could have used this back in New Purgatory. If we can keep it fueled, it should get us home, I take it. I won't know until I get her up in the air, Layla replied as she brought her hand back down to the controls. Sometimes I wonder how you know all this stuff within a few minutes of looking at the controls, Alex said. Layla smiled and pointed just above the weapon controls. There was writing in small letters for each respective control scheme. Alex shook his head and laughed. For fuck's sake. Let's just get this thing fueled and go find Gates. Gates had found his way to the old parking lot, now covered in several layers of sand. He saw his old bike lying in the middle. The wind had tipped it over, and constant sandstorms had scratched the paint on the fuel tank, and there was rust on some of the old chrome pipes. Gates ran a hand through his short brown hair. Coarse sand fell from his head. He squatted down and hefted his bike back up to its wheels, and then sat on it. He tried wiping off some of the rust on the handlebars, but it was to no avail. Sam started to fear for the engine. He flipped over the kickstarter with his foot and slammed down on it once. The bike roared to life before stuttering a bit and then evening out. He smiled. Time to get going. he said as he twisted the throttle and made back for the airship. He found Alex, Layla, and the new bird parked next to the old one. He watched as Alex carried food and ammo from one bird to the other. "So, you're just going to leave this one then?" Gates asked as he killed the engine to his bike. "Not much use for it," Alex replied, "and I can't fly one of them." "I don't know if you should just leave it here, though. In the wrong hands, someone could fuck shit up out here," Sam said. "It doesn't have any fuel. Besides, there's nothing out here but desert," Layla replied. Sam shook his head. "You two haven't lived in the wastes, the real wastes, in a long time. This bird has more uses than flying." Gates saw Alex look over at Layla. She had a scowl on her face like she was offended by what he had said. "What?" she asked. "I used to be a salvage runner in New Purgatory," she said as she crossed her arms. "What are you going to take off that thing that has practical use without the right tools?" Gates walked over to the outer hole. Any half-decent welder could shear off some of this plating and use it for armor for a vehicle or a shelter. Gates then moved towards one of the engines on the wing. A jet engine might require fuel, but the parts inside don't. Take the fan blades, for instance. If sharpened right, you have a whole collection of short blades. The smaller parts can be used to patch up old engines or generators with a little rigging. And don't get me started on the electronics in the cockpit. Gates saw that the two were listening and not going back to work and ignoring his advice. That's when he knew the two had to have some survival skills, the primary one being knowledge and knowing its value when it was presented. "All right, Gates, what do you suggest we do then?" Alex asked. "Pull the small items we can take with us, burn the rest. We won't be able to carry the plating, but the electronics and turbine parts we can make room for." "Let's do it then, but fast. I've had enough of this desert," Alex replied. "You and me both," Sam said. After several hours of pulling electronics and disassembling the old Hellchopper's engines, Alex, Layla, and Sam were up in the air and headed east. Alex watched as Sam was using some of the stored food to cook himself a meal that didn't consist of spiders or mice. Alex sipped on a water bottle that had some old protein powder in it. He wasn't hungry, but he knew he needed to eat something. Occasionally, he'd look down at the wrapping on his left hand. To distract himself, he was looking through Jack's old journal again, trying to find anything he could that would help New Purgatory when he finally returned. "So many options, so little time. I've had my eyes on a group that's risen out in the wastes. For now, I'm just watching them and waiting, trying to see what they're capable of. Most of the time, they're just struggling to survive, defending themselves against patrols. But other times they take the fight to the Marines. My guess is that they're just taking supplies, fresh water, food, occasionally a vehicle to move them to another part of the city. But they've never even sniffed the entertainment district, which makes me wonder if they even know it's there. They probably think Morrison keeps a platoon here to weed out refugees. But under the bright neon lights, everyone in this district is equal. You can't tell the survivors from the stiffs who live up in the towers until a fight breaks out. That's probably the only reason Morrison has a hands-off approach to the bars down here. It wouldn't look too good if he launched a raid to get at the refugees and ended up knocking off some rich bastard's son that was trying to get away for a night. Asshole. It's easy enough to kill children out in the wastes, just not in your own backyard. Still, that makes us exempt from his searches. Doubtful he knows half the shit that goes on here and would prefer to keep it that way. We're close enough to the city center to be considered controlled territory. That has its benefits. I'll have Alonso scouts keep an eye on this team. They might even prove useful. Nayala contacted me again today. Said she was curious about the kid. I told her to go check on him in Russia if she cared enough, to tell him the same story, see if he's changed at all. I might be old, but I'm not stupid. She loves him. Probably more than she loves me. I hope this time he finally makes his move, otherwise he's not ready. Not for what I need him for. I haven't had any luck on getting my messages through to Otto, and Dale hasn't replied to any of my messages. When the time comes, I'll just have to drop in. He won't like that, but he doesn't have a choice. He'll understand it. We've got to finish what we started, whether he likes it or not. And his brothers. Janet took off again on another trip. This time she was heading up north. Sometimes I wonder if I should have helped her along with that rifle training. The moment she got any good at it, she started roaming the wastes. I didn't think I'd get so attached to the kid. I miss her when she's not around. The girl is more like Eric than I thought she would be. That coarse exterior shell hides the real woman inside. The one that cares for the people who surround her. The one that knows this life isn't as much as it could be. She's my reminder that I must keep working towards the future. She's a natural with a gun. That cold machine blood doesn't die out with Eric. Whatever he knew, he instilled in her. I hope she finds something that belonged to him at Fort Freedom. The base was new enough in mass. Chances are good it survived the war. I got an interesting message from Africa. Fuck only knows what happened out there when the bombs hit. The message came from Egypt, marked New Cairo. Amaris, or Maeve Amaris, as she's calling herself now. She was a squad mate from my old team's time in the Middle East. Last I heard, she stayed behind to help keep some of the governments we liberated going. I figured she was dead. If her timing had been better, I might have been able to go out to this tournament of hers, see the kinds of warriors that are being made down there, maybe even snag a few recruits. But I'll have to set it aside for now. I can't spare the time to go to Old Cairo. Old Cairo? Egypt, Alex said to himself as he closed Jack's journal. What? Gates called out across from him in the compact bird's hole. Alex forgot how enclosed this bird was. The old hell chopper he took down Morrison with was large enough to have some free space to think and talk out loud. Alex saw that Gates was pouring a package of salt on a pink meat disc. Nothing. You make anything for me? Alex asked. You kidding me? I haven't had a decent MRE in months, Gates replied as he took a bite out of the disc. Huh. I thought this was going to be ham. Alex cringed before he stood up, and then made way for the cockpit. He propped the door open. How is it? He asked as he walked in. Layla rotated her chair. Flies real smooth, and it's quick. We'll be home in a day, with an hour or two spared for refueling. Are you serious? It would have taken 3 in the old bird. I thought this was a short-range strike craft. Looks like I was wrong about her specs. Compared to the other bird, this is more like a long-range reconnaissance bird. How's your hand? Alex looked down to examine the wrappings for the first time since he bound his hand. Some of the blood had made it to the exterior of the medical wraps. He pulled his hand back down to his side. Try not to think about it. I just lost a finger. Could have lost more. He saw Layla fight off a cold chill. Alex knew if it had been Layla lying on the slab instead of him, she would still be freaking out about having to watch a cannibal suck the meat off the bone. You're not giving her enough credit. You never do. She's stronger than you most of the time, and smarter. Don't pretend you're walking away from this unscathed. Could have been worse. They could have taken my trigger finger instead, Alex said, trying to add levity. Figure something like this would happen during our getaway, Layla sighed. Nothing is ever easy. Not in this life. Are you thirsty or anything? Just tired. If you could get me some coffee. I'll go see what we have left, Alex replied. Layla watched him leave the room and spun her chair back around. There wasn't much flying to do with the aircraft on autopilot, and for that she was thankful. Layla was lost in her thoughts. The two of them had changed. The conversations were less innocent or fun, and more about utility. That was practical, but what they had wasn't practical. She thought about Alex losing his idealism and becoming more somber, a product of the lives he had taken and the friends they had lost. It wasn't a happy judgment, and it made her wonder what he thought of her. Layla felt that she had become braver and had found the strength to put her childhood behind her. But even as they made way back for New Purgatory, she thought they might have been making a mistake. So much for being brave. She thought the same when they had left New Purgatory so soon after freeing the city. But like Alex, she needed a break from the killing and death that the city had come to embody. That break was over. Now they needed to return and help fix the new mess they had created. And talking with Janet, Layla had become concerned, not because of the work to be done, but because of her friend's lack of optimism. Layla shrugged it off, though. She knew Janet had never been optimistic about anything. She was a realist who set goals and expected them to be completed quickly and accurately. Rebuilding a city had a lot of goals, and Layla knew that Alex wanted Janet to run those goals because each one that wouldn't be completed would be hit harder and with more determination the next time around. She ran a hand through her short blonde hair. She had cut it while they were away. There was still length that reached her neck and allowed her to crop it behind her ears, but she was debating going even shorter. More utility. She wasn't sure she was ready to see the ruins of the Empire State Building, Alon's foes, or the rooms that had belonged to the fallen. She reached up and grasped at the dog tags around her neck that Jack Newsom had gifted her before he died. She wondered how many more of those gifts were buried under the rubble of that place. She felt a warm hand rest on her shoulder, which broke her from her thoughts. Another hand reached out to the control panel and placed a mug down in front of her. You all right? Alex asked. Just thinking of home, Layla replied. Alex gave her a half smile and looked out into the cloudy beyond. Yeah, me too. After Gates had eaten, he went to work inspecting each one of his arrows individually. He looked for any cracks in their foundation or chips on their points that would render them useless. How many of those do you have? Alex asked as he made his way back out the cockpit. I try to have 20 whenever I can, then 3 more attached to the bow itself. You ever run dry on the field? Not if I'm doing my job right. Gates wasn't in the mood to talk shop about treating weapons, and he had a feeling Alex wasn't either. He assumed the younger man must have taken the hint because Alex sat down across from him and began cleaning and sharpening the survival knife he carried at his side. Gates caught a glimpse of it and saw that it looked worn down. It had scratches from the rubber hilt all the way up to the tip. Where'd you get your hands on that steel? Alex looked up as he continued to run the sharpening tool down the knife. It's from an old friend who went missing. Saved my life and left this behind for me. And now you carry it? Only until I can find him again. I have another I left at home. A parang, Alex explained. Why not bring that? That same blade was wielded by the man who killed my best friend. Could still use it, Gates scoffed. The world is about survival. Emotional attachment or not, a tool is a tool. It's only useless when it breaks. It took a moment for him to notice that Alex was looking at him sideways. Gates realized then that he forgot to offer condolences for the man's fallen friend. Too late now, ass. You're not one for emotions, are you, Sam? Alex asked. Gates looked back down at his arrows and pulled one out of the quiver. He held it up and examined the carbon rod between the arrow tip and the end. I'm not keen on talking about them. Practicality is what matters to me. I don't live in a world that allows me to take trophies or cast aside useful gear because of emotion. The only thing I own that carries meaning is my life, and I'm happy to do what I can and salvage what I can to keep it. Gates saw how Alex was thinking that over. He had no doubt the younger man knew about survival, but Alex's brand was different than his own. He had never lived out in the deep wastes where water was more valuable than the next weapon you got your hand on. It's been a while since we've had to live that way, Alex started. For a while we weren't sure we would be able to survive without eating garbage and drinking from old, moldy drain pipes. That's why we chose to fight. Gates gave Alex a nod. Don't take what I said personally. It always takes a bit for me to get used to being around people again. But this is stepping into a new world for me. This is probably a stupid question, but I assume you know how to use a gun? Alex asked. It is a stupid question. I don't usually carry out in the field, though. It's a waste of rounds. I'd rather be sitting on a big pile of ammunition at my shelter if attacked and wait for anybody who attacks me to run out. Then I can pick them off one by one with what I have. That's fighting by attrition, but I get the feeling you haven't had that luxury. Not when my enemies could shell my home. No, we fought on the streets and had plenty of ammo to strip. You were trying to survive in the wastes, but we were surviving a war, Alex replied. Well, that's a skill set I don't have, so maybe we'll be able to teach each other a thing or two. But New Purgatory, got that name from the same war you were fighting, I take it. That's a long story. The guy we killed, he named it that after the government folded. His dad helped create the tech that saved the city. Except the son turned out to be a tyrant. He killed a lot of people then. Sort of an understatement, Gates, but it doesn't really matter now. We stopped him. Give me the rundown. Gates watched as Alex set his blade back in its sheath and then crossed his arms. I guess to understand it all, I have to start around 10 years ago. 24 hours had come and gone. Alex's story and Gates' question had filled 3 hours of that gap, maybe more. Layla used the intercom to wake the two up. We're here, boys. Alex and Gates got up and made for one of the viewports. Fog covered the city, and skyscrapers broke through like exposed scars. Alex wondered if there were still people in the ones that were closest to Morrison's tower since the man died. Holy shit, Gates said. You weren't kidding. Alex was still staring at the fog. It was blindingly bright from the sun's reflection. It almost hid the crag cityscape and shanty towns that lie below. Yeah, this is about all that's left. Plenty of buildings, but a lot of them are empty. The ones that are still standing are in poor shape. Not to make it seem any worse, but none of the damage you can see was caused by the bombs. Morrison and everyone who fought against him must take responsibility for that. Alex explained. Yeah, it looks more like a war zone than some of the towns back west. None of these buildings would be standing at all, and there'd be far fewer people. It was a war zone. Still is. See the mass amount of rubble there? That's where the Empire State Building used to be. 6 good friends are buried there. Shit. Alex forced himself away from the window. I knew I wasn't ready to see it again. He made for the cockpit, but Gates continued to look out at the city. Before the war, he had seen pictures of New York, videos, and old movies. After the war, he had figured all those things to be nothing more than a myth. Occasionally, he'd hear rumors of re-established societies out east, but nothing this large. The fog brightened by the sun's rays was different from Nevada's glass desert, pouring his body with heat. Gates felt the sun coming in through the window. It was soft warmth that felt good on his skin. This was a new beginning and a new place, a chance at more than survival. A chance that he might be able to live his life instead of just prolonging it. Gates forced himself away from the morning's beauty and back into reality. He followed Alex into the cockpit. Understood. Thanks, Alonso. Bringing her down on the roof. Glad you finally added a real helipad, Layla said as she cut the communicator off. She tried to keep her breathing even and the stick steady. Behind her, she could hear Alex gripping and letting loose of the top of her chair. Layla tried not to focus on him, even if he was probably about to have a heart attack. She heard a slap on the back of his shoulder. You all right? Gates asked. Yeah, I just hate landing, Alex replied. Layla knew he was lying. He hated every part of flying. This was one of the few places he couldn't hide his fear. The familiar thump and feel of inertia that put her stomach back where it should have been let Layla know they had hit the helipad. She hit a few switches, killing the bird's engines, and another to open the rear hatch. As she stood up and turned around, she saw that Alex was taking deep breaths to regain his composure. She put a hand up to his face and left it there until he was breathing normally again. Come on, tough guy, Layla said. We wouldn't want to keep our old friend waiting. Alex smiled back at her and extended his hand towards the rear ramp. The trio made for the exit and into New Purgatory.